Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Tanya here with Victoria Haffer, and I'm really excited about our conversation that we're going to have today. So the title of the show is Transforming Your Trauma into Your Superpower. So just so you guys know, Victoria is an oracle. She is a somatic movement therapist. She's a possibilities coach. She's got a lot of tools in her toolkit, which I'm sure we'll cover some of them. One that I'm particularly excited about is your work with animals and and your intuitive healing abilities, all of those things. So you got a lot here, and welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tanya. I'm so excited too. All the possibilities are endless for us to chat about magical, wonderful things. So I'm excited.
Wonderful. Yeah. So share with us your story of transformation.
My story of transformation. So it's interesting because I have a few different stories, but the story I'm going to share is around addiction and recovery. And obviously trauma. I don't know that I've ever met anyone that there wasn't a link to some kind of trauma to the addiction, situation and story. So, I started, I grew up in there was a lot of addiction. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was emotionally unavailable. And there was I had access to alcohol and all kinds of drugs at a very young age. It was just there, it was easy to have. And, I smoked pot with my mom when I was 13. I drank, I could have a beer, I could all these things. Mm-hmm. And, but I didn't love it, even at a young age. I don't think that I had, I wasn't super awake, but I was very wise, right? So we might call it that, the old soul. People always came to me for advice and, all those things. And so I had access to all these things, around me, and I didn't love it. I'm really glad that I didn't love it, because I feel like, because I do have the frequency, as Tommy Rosen calls it, of addiction in my field, that it would have been really easy to be, addicted to marijuana or addicted to drinking, but it didn't make me feel better. So I never really went there. However, and I thought I had escaped the addiction, the hook, right? I have two younger sisters, and they were in that space too. They were younger than me, but then as they got older, there was a lot of drugs and alcohol and things that were in the space. But what I did have a not so healthy relationship with was food. So that started, my late teens. It was probably before then. I mean, I don't know how old anybody is, but, SpaghettiOs, in the can, fish sticks and tater tots.
Yes.
Captain Crunch was my favorite cereal. So, now, as I know, as a holistic, healer for people and animals, and I look at, basically I ate sugar. That's all I ate, was processed crap and sugar all the time. And so I started feeling very lonely and feeling like I was not super connected. There weren't people like me, at that time. It was sort of like, I didn't feel like there were really people that were deep. Like I was, people would call me, I'm deep. Like I would want to have deep conversations and, that whole thing. And so I just kind of felt like I was all alone, and how I would fill the void often was with food. Right. So, that went for a few years. And so I battled with an eating disorder, and then I healed myself from that, and I healed my relationship with food. And I thought, okay, this is great. And then I moved into, I would say, a love and sex addiction. So it was sort of like constantly looking outside of myself, right, for love. Mm-hmm. I didn't have, my mom loved me, my dad loved me, but there wasn't a lot of safety. I didn't feel safe in my body. There was, again, I could go on and on about that. Yeah. And so I constantly was looking for the guy that was going to save me, like literally, like Rapunzel. And I'm up in the, the tower, and he's going to ride in on the and so that went on for 20 years. I had many relationships, very toxic, and it just so happened that being in the frequency of addiction, that I kept attracting that frequency in relationships as well. So it took me a while. And then, of course, I started moving into a lot of the transformational work. I mean, I was in fitness as a teenager, and I started to get into yoga probably in my 30s, and, deep study and meditation and a lot of the different healing practices, Reiki and energy healing. So again, I was constantly looking outside myself to heal myself, to make me feel more fulfilled and whole. I constantly was just, doing the thing, right? Doing the thing outside. And so that went on for like 20 years, that whole love and sex addiction, until about 8 years ago, where I met and again, and all the while I'm doing the work, right? I'm doing the work. We know that there's always more work to be doing, and, learning more, doing more trainings, how many that was another addiction, constantly outside. And then on top of that, it turned into credit card debt, bankruptcy. And so now it turned into a money addiction. So it's like, as Tommy Rosen says, addiction can be a game of whack-a-mole, where
shape shifts or something, right? Like just,
you think you get the thing, you think you've dealt with the thing, and then you're like, oh, good, I'm good with that. And then it's, it just kept popping up. And so I'm actually in that space now with the healing of the money and the relationship and all those things. And so all this time, over 20 years, I've been supporting women in their own challenges around habits, right? So often we hear the word addiction, and it can be a very poo-poo word, like the elephant in the room, like nobody wants to talk about addiction. And most people have this vision of what addiction looks like. It's you're falling down drunk, you're slurring your words, you're shooting up in a back alley, and you might be doing those things, right? But
sure.
The six major, I mean, there's more than six, but addictions are, food. So food is huge. And again, there's so much shame, the emotions that we hold around these things. So many women are very confident, intelligent, on the outside, they look real good. And then the inside, what is the thing that maybe, and not everybody has addiction, but I do believe that it's pretty widespread,
pretty widespread. I think it just takes different forms. There are the physical addictions, and then there's like emotional addictions and addictions to drama, or addiction to, I don't know, work, for example. Yeah.
And that was another one of mine, Tanya, like workaholic, because, I was so lonely, and, the relationship thing wasn't happening. And I wanted that more than anything, to have that partner, that person that had my back and loved me so much and was going to take away all my pain and my suffering. That, certainly wasn't what happened, but it was. And so I put all my time and energy into work. And so, I've often heard addiction defined as really something that we continue to do over and over that creates a negative consequence in our life, that we're not willing to really look at. So again, whether, like you said, I mean, it can be electronics, it can be alcohol. I mean, I've had clients who, even to the point where, it's only one glass of wine, it's only 2 glasses of wine every night. Oh, now it's only 3. So it's not so much that drinking a glass of wine means you have a problem. It's really about your relationship with the substance or the behavior or the tool, and how it's affecting, right, your day to day, like scrolling on social media. There's so many, I mean, negative self-talk is a huge one, that inner critic that often can run the show, that the inner critic, the inner cynic, right, that's just constantly showing up. And if that part of you is stopping you from bringing your magic to the world, then I would call that, a low vibrational habit, pattern, or behavior / addiction. right? So it's when we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different end result, aka insanity, as we know the definition. Where does it stop? Where does that end? And where does it become that addiction of the thing that you're doing over and over that is creating, like I said, a negative consequence or even self-harming in some way, where it's creating that negative loop, right? Of the shame and the just the not feeling good about ourselves, because you could do all the right things, go to the gym, you do all the things, and then you come home and you go in your closet and you eat, a dozen donuts because you just can't handle what's happening. And then that shame cycle, it brings us back. It's that hamster wheel that's never ending. And that is indeed an addiction. So it's a topic. I feel like it's a conversation that needs to be had, especially with women,
Yeah. Well, I can relate to food, definitely. I mean, I think as a kid, that's kind of like when there were things I didn't want to feel, like the distress in the household. It was like, just eat a big old plate of spaghetti. Definitely. Like when I look back and I think about how much I ate, I'm like, oh my God, like how, and I obviously had that, and the way it was modeled to me too. My father had an unhealthy relationship with food. So it was just, these things that get passed down to us too, like it's modeled back at us. I mean, like your example, I mean, if mom's lighting up a doobie, like, yeah, who's to say that you can't either, so, I'm curious about, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an addiction expert, but from what I've heard, it is often stems from a sense of not belonging. Would you say that's true, or do you know it as something else, or are there other?
Oh no, absolutely, it's a huge part, and of course, there's layers, but not belonging / lack of connection, right? To self, to others, to source, right? So it's all of that. And so, and I think I said to you in the first, 5 minutes that I never felt like I belonged. I literally never felt like I belonged here. And that actually for me was more, as I found out later, I'm a starseed. So that's a whole other, conversation.
I want to go into that because that's like, that's like my favorite things to talk about.
Yeah, we can, wherever you want to go is fine with me. I love it all. It makes me so happy. And for so long, I didn't understand. I really thought there was something wrong with me because I found out later on there's a name for it, and it's called I'm a psychic empath, right? You hear different, or highly sensitive person, HSP. I'm really both of them. And so it's really in all the training and the research and the study that I've done around all those things. You kind of look at, trauma is typically, it has a deep connection to being an empath. Now, does it mean that if you're an empath that you had trauma? Maybe not. Maybe 5% doesn't have trauma, but it's typically, empathy, that the true aspect of being an empath. When I say that, I mean, you can literally feel other people's stuff. You can pick it up. You can literally feel it in your physical body, and it can actually show up as a physical manifestation of a knee problem or a headache, or right. You with me? I know you know this, Tanya. You're and if we look at it scientifically, right? We could say, well, because of my quote unquote trauma, because I didn't feel safe, because I was dealing with inconsistent parents, and I never knew how their mood would be, or how they were going to show up, or if they were even going to be available for me, and versus checked out in front of the TV with a glass of whatever they were drinking next to them. So as a small child, I had to fend for myself a lot, right? So when those things happen, you get really good at being able to read the room, So again, is it genetic? I mean, it's possible, right? That our genes, we have so many beautiful and wonderful talents and, characteristics that come from our DNA. However, in doing a lot of, spending a lot of time in the trainings and the books around trauma, I feel like it has a lot more to do with our experience, growing up.
So it's kind of like a response or a mechanism that gets formed as a way of like, okay, I've experienced this trauma. How do I not let that happen again? And you start to kind of, because as a child, you're not, especially if there's no one there to advocate for you, or you start to recognize at a very young age, like, oh, like I don't have any adults here to actually who are really raising me or protecting me. So I'm just going to do my best how to navigate this.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I mean, my mom, she was great. I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 6. She had to take care of us mostly, 3 kids. She didn't even know how to balance a checkbook. Right. So my mom is so amazing, and she did the best she could. Right. And so that's the thing, right? We know it's not about trashing our parents or blaming them for anything. Right. And the thing is as I work with my clients, they're adults, right? They're all adults, and consciously on an adult level, we know that we're okay, right? We're safe. But what we've learned about trauma is that if you don't resolve the trauma, right, whatever the thing was, and it doesn't have to be sexual abuse or physical abuse, or you were in the war, and those are obviously major traumas that people deal with to cultivate this thing we call PTSD. But they've also found, again, extensive research and studies that people who just, didn't get the love and the attention and their basic level of need. I mean, my needs were met. I always had food. I always had clothes and shoes on my feet, all that. It wasn't that, but it was sort of that, like, just being acknowledged and someone there to say, like, wow, you're so different as a young child, and you're amazing.
Right. Having somebody being actually present with you and seeing you, like, I see you. I
I was like, exactly. Oh my God, Tanya, you saying that, that just like really hit home. It's sort of like, that's the thing. You're kind of like, I'm here. And kids can go different. Some kids will go loud and boisterous and do all kinds of crazy things to get their parents' attention. Right. Like go out and do things that, get in trouble, not get bad grades, and then some kids will go on the opposite end where I'm going to be perfect. And that's where a lot of times the perfectionism comes in. I mean, we learn it, we buy it from typically our parents or our teachers or, authority figures that we work with. And then there's the other child that goes, I'm just gonna hide, right? I'm gonna be the good. I'm gonna be the good girl and go, or boy, of course, go into the, constantly be in their room with their imaginary friends, which are real, by the way, right? But reading a lot of books, going inward, right? So it's like you start to cultivate those things because you're like, how uncomfortable is that when you're not being ignored? And as a child, you don't know what needs you need, what needs you need. You know what I mean? You can't really ask for at 6 or 7, 8 years old, they say by the age of 7 that we have cultivated the majority of our belief systems at the age of 7, right? So think about that. Think about being 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old and being this open channel, right? Just a complete, like, no filter. Right. So everything you're experiencing, is just coming into you, whether it be good, bad, ugly, unhealthy, toxic, joyful, any of those things, you're going to get all of it. And everything, like, so it's like we cultivate so many of our belief systems around every aspect, what a romantic relationship should look like. Right. So for me, like, I had this belief, like, I was like, well, I never, ever want to get married or have kids, which I didn't have children, which that was a conscious choice. And I'm really happy with that. I have no regrets. But I had this fear that the worst thing that can happen to me is I'll get married, I'll get pregnant, and then my partner will leave. and I'll have to raise my kids all by myself,
Mm-hmm.
which of course is kind of what my mom had to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so you get to that point where you're like, I don't need to have kids, so I went the other way, even though I do, it's part of the DNA. It's part of our, as we call it, in the Akashic records. So I believe that, it was all divine, right? All of it was divine.
Right.
And it all worked out amazingly. But yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating, right? To just look at how each one of us has our own experience, and what are the needs that we need, as children. And that if we, and so now it's kind of what I do with women is I teach them how to give their inner child the healing that they didn't get, right? Because the truth is, we everything is happening simultaneously, right? We can jump timelines. And as a clinical hypnotherapist, and I've so many trainings and tools, like you said, in my toolbox. But being able to go back in time with somebody and reframe the story, right? Like the story that, my mother never thought I was pretty. I'm not saying that about me, but let's just say,
yeah, what would reframing the story look like?
Yeah, like my mother was constantly trying to live vicariously through the child, and at like 6 years old had her in a beauty pageant, like things like that, like really young, and then wearing makeup at that age, and not, and putting them on a diet, right? These things happen with parents. And again, the parent loves the child, right? But they haven't done their work. So it's like, breaking the ancestral, right? The curse that we all have in our families. It's like, where does it stop?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like such a big part of my mission, is to support women in that, where can we stop that thing? And so we don't have to carry it on, and when we heal it now, it literally heals on all timelines. It's so cool, past, present, and future, right? It's not just, it can end with us, but it also can heal, right? The past generations, I guess you would say, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so how, I'm curious, going back to this title here. So if someone has a trauma, like how do you take a client who comes and is like, I've got this trauma, whatever the trauma is, like, how do you transform that into a superpower?
That's right. Oh my God. So first of all, most people aren't really aware of their trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they might, if it was a real big trauma, like, someone was in the military and they were sexually abused, like they know that trauma.
Right.
But often it's very subtle things that happen to us during childhood, right? And let's just say, for example, something my mother always said to me when I was a kid was, "You're so sensitive."
Right. Yep, I got that one too.
Why do you have to be so sensitive, Tanya?
Yeah. Exactly.
Right, Victoria. So those kinds of things. I mean, it's different for everybody. But empathy, again, can be people would consider it a curse, and it can be your superpower, right? So when I started to learn, first of all, that so many of my clients, I often work with young women, like, maybe in their late 20s and early 30s. And so they might not even know what an empath is. Like I didn't at that age. So they don't realize they have, often it looks like it shows up as chronic anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. Depression. And really what happens is, because we're so open, right? Just imagine, like a sponge, right? You know how you when you soak everything up. So we're this human sponge, and we're sensitive, which again, we maybe looked at it as not so positive as in childhood. And now you're this open frequency with all of these radio waves coming into you, right? So we've got 3G, 4G, 5G, and now they've just rolled out 6G. So literally when you hear the G, it's a different frequency. It's sort of like when you turn, you listen to the radio. I don't know if you listen to the radio anymore, but you turn the dial and it comes in clear and you can sing along. I'm singing along to, Bon Jovi or whatever I'm doing, right? Yeah. But if the frequency isn't spot on, it's going to be a little crackly, right? Yeah. So those are all the frequencies coming at us, right? We've got the cell towers and the Wi-Fi and the routers and all the different G's coming at us. So that's one thing. That's one thing. And then imagine everybody's thoughts and feelings and emotions and ocean. I don't know, emotions and oceans. I think of that because we are the ocean, right? Yeah. So it's like, you've got this stuff coming in and, it's been proven that, have you ever had a situation where you're thinking about someone you haven't thought about in a really long time, and then suddenly they call you, or they send you an email. So that's because you actually felt them thinking about you. Like that energy literally came into your field and you guys were connected. So just like, I can't remember if you're an energy healer, Reiki or anything. Yeah. Things. Yeah. I thought so. So, Reiki or any of that healing frequencies, that's why we can do long distance healing, right? Because energy, everything. So again, imagine now you're this highly sensitive, empathic person. You don't really know. And then you're this open channel and you can literally feel, hear, maybe even see. It depends on your superpower of your ability to be psychic, right? Your psychic receiving channels. And you're feeling overwhelmed, right? That's a big part of anxiety. I often say that anxiety is having excess energy in your body with nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. I've also heard it say that anxiety is your body is telling you that something is wrong, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah. Right.
So again, if we're dealing with all of this frequency coming in and it's creating this overwhelm, right? Which is so common with people, especially women, in our bodies, in our mind, and we don't know how to discharge the energy. Mm-hmm. Right? So anyway, this is a huge thing. So that's what I teach people, right? I teach people how to do that, right? And so as we start to unpack all of the things, as well as the potential mini micro traumas that maybe have occurred during childhood, during, body talk therapy or, some kind of hypnosis or oracle, I just get downloads when I work with people. Mm-hmm. So it'll be something that comes up. And then I teach people how to tap into their own, right, psychic receiving channels. A lot of people that I've worked with have that power, had that power as a child, but was afraid of it or got made fun of, or people didn't believe them. Did that happen to you, Tanya? I can't remember if you had shared that with me, because I know you've
No, I was pretty quiet. I mean, I don't think I really share. I was the quiet, perfect, good girl. So nobody knew what I was really thinking.
That's right. Yeah. So you didn't have anybody to tell you that, don't you ever think that again, or that's stupid, or don't tell anybody that, right? So it depends. Everybody's going to be different. But, I've had a lot of clients that have been extremely psychic and a very open channel at a very young age. And, but for whatever reason, they shut it down. Right. They shut it down and then they kind of forget it. So, I teach people so whatever those things are, right? I mean, really being extremely sensitive and being able to pick up on people's energy can be extremely powerful and debilitating, right? Yeah. So if you don't know what to do with that, then it can, I've had clients who have attempted suicide, been in and out of hospitals for all kinds of cutting, drugs. And unfortunately, what happens when you open yourself up, when you don't feel safe as a child, and you do this thing we call disassociation, right? In the trauma world, we talk about it. It's when you literally leave your body, right? I know you know this. And because whatever you're experiencing is so painful. It could be emotionally painful, mentally painful, or physically painful, right? So your parents constantly fighting, right? It's just too much. And, you see the little kids in the movies and they're like, no, right? It's just so hard. And so what do we do? What do we do to numb out? We put the headphones on, we chew our fingernails, we eat a whole box of cereal, right? Or we go somewhere else. Maybe we start having sex at a young age because we're just trying to get away and try to, right, to numb that. Or maybe you have no feeling, and then that's where you do the cutting and you're just looking for something.
Some kind of sensation.
Yeah, there's so many, right? There's so many like layers to all of it. And so going back to the disassociation, which is really common with trauma/addiction, because what happens is you check out. You literally are you can't handle what's happening, and part of your soul literally leaves your body. Right? So you've ever heard of soul retrievals, like in the shamanic world, right? And that is because parts of your soul leave, and then you don't feel complete. Do you see? So we were talking about the belonging piece. And again, I don't have the answer for sure. Which comes first? Is it the trauma? Because the trauma could have been in the womb.
Yeah.
Right. So it could be you had a birth trauma, right? So we don't even know. Most of us don't remember that stuff, right? But it sits in the subconscious mind, right? In the shadow, like in the shadow work that we talk about. So when you check out, or a part of you or your soul leaves your body, or part of your soul leaves your body, unfortunately, you open yourself up to what we call entities. Right? So beings without bodies, they're all over the place. Don't be scared, anyone who's watching us, right? It's nothing to be scared about. But often entities will walk right in. And this is where we see things like the split personality. So different conditions that psychology would call it something else. But I have actually worked with many clients where I have cleared entities on them, and their behavior is no longer split, not manic, not any of those. Like, it's just crazy, right? So just know that can happen with animals as well, especially with animals that have been abused. Horses.
Oh, wow.
Horses and dogs. And when you see animals that check out, like I've worked with a lot of dogs that were in backyard breeding situations. And they, just imagine if it's not a good situation, they're basically stuck. Like one particular client that I worked with, this cute, tiny little Shih Tzu, was being bred, right? So she had litter after litter after litter after litter after litter. And so one thing, she was in a cage all the time. Number two, yeah, I mean, I know it's really heartbreaking, right? And so she just kept having babies, and they were just taking them away from her, right? So she never, can you imagine the heartbreak?
No.
So this specific dog, I know it is really hard, but I'm glad I can do this work, because before, if I didn't learn how to harness my superpower as an empath, I could never do this work because I wouldn't stop crying.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? I wouldn't stop crying. So she was like so checked out that you could drop, a metal pot on the ground and she wouldn't even flinch. Wow. That's how checked out she was. But after one session with me, her whole life was different. Of Reiki. We did Reiki and crystals and essential oils, and changed her whole life, one session. So, it's great. The work is so amazing. And
yeah, and I'm glad that you said that, because I want people to understand that even though, we're talking about all these heavy things, which are real. And if you're sitting here going like, oh, I have trauma, and wow, this sounds like it's a lot of work, or that it's hard, um, when I've just seen that radical transformations can happen really quickly. Like, it doesn't have to take years and years and years.
Oh, no.
If you don't go I mean, I'll say if you don't go the traditional routes.
Yes. Yes. Traditional talk therapy. And the reason why, and again, if it's worked for you, blessings, right? The reason why traditional talk therapy often doesn't work with trauma is because the trauma sits in our body.
Yeah.
The trauma sits in our body, and that's where that's where the somatic practices come in. And you can't heal trauma. I mean, I'm going to go on a limb here, through the mind,
Yeah.
just, I mean, there's one technique that I've heard. It's called EMDR, with a therapist that people have done for PTSD. I have heard really good things about it. So again, I don't ever want to say never to any of it, but I also have met, hundreds of people, like, know people like on social media, and that, until they started to incorporate the inner child work and the body therapy, which is about, emotion coding, right? Because it's about the body, because we store, you might have heard the term issues in our tissues, right? We literally store trauma in our bodies, and even outside of our bodies. If you know about tuning forks and working with the right biofield, right? They've actually said that we can trap emotions in the emotional field, in the mental field, right? And it just so that's why tuning forks and crystal bowls and healing, sound healing frequencies can be really powerful as well. And I do want to go back to what you said, Tanya, about the time frame. We have been programmed to think that it takes a really long time to heal stuff, right? Like, so again, just think about the program that you have. I know, for example, when I used to work with my clients, it was a 6-month program. They would have to commit to at least 6 months with me. And it was amazing. After 6 months, people, boom. I mean, sometimes even a little before that, they would just be like, I don't have any problems. I don't have, like, I'm happy. I'm joyful. They attracted a man. Like, honestly, it sounds like, fairy tale stuff, but everything would be great. And then I was like, 6 months? No, I don't need 6 months. Now it's 3 months. And in most people, and again, sometimes it's one session. I mean, I literally had one person come to me for a session. Again, one session, their whole life was changed. So I don't ever want to be like that it has to be this even 3 months. But think about, often we've had these habits, these patterns, these belief systems, how we're showing up, and the stories that we've had. But it literally takes 1 second to drop your story, right? Because you're not trying. This, how many times have we heard our clients say, Tanya, like, I'm trying. I'm trying to do this thing. I'm working on it. And I say, how long you been working on it? How long have you been working on it? And that's the ego keeping us stuck in that addiction loop of figuring out, of trying to figure it out. I'm trying to figure it out. Right. How many people relate to that one?
Yeah. Right. Totally. Oh my gosh. Victoria, I just love your energy, and I know we're getting close to the end of this interview, and there's so much more. Well, I'll have to have you come back on.
I would love to. And again, if your listeners are like, oh, we really want to hear more about this one thing, maybe animals. I could talk about animals all day long.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And maybe another interview to talk about animals, animal communication, working with animals. I mean, you do equine facilitated healing, which horses, man, amazing beings. Well, it's not my jam because I don't have horses, but I have experienced how easy it is to psychically communicate and receive information from them. They're just so awake and so aware. Anyway, but we'll have to save that for another time.
Yeah, and we should. And I do want to say really quick that I actually have anybody that wants to fly into North Carolina, the second weekend in December, I have a workshop, healing with horses. So it's going to be a one day training to teach people how to heal with and heal horses, because again, there's a lot of horses out there that could use some, trauma clearing, right? So
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, so it's too funny. I'm realizing that I didn't forgot to show the banner. I'll put it right here, right now. Here we go. So if you want to, right?
there we go. See, it was perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. So, go to victoriahaffer.com to learn more about her and her offerings. The Healing with Horses sounds amazing. If you're in that area, I highly recommend. Like, honestly, if there was somebody nearby here that was saying like, "Hey, I want to do a Healing with Horses workshop," I'd be there in a heartbeat, because
Yes.
it's amazing. It's amazing what animals have.
And the healings we receive. It's, it's funny, even the horses that have been as traumatized as they have been, they always reciprocate. Like, you get a healing as well. It's so powerful. And Tanya, can I share one more thing that's coming up for me?
Yep.
So I have a free webinar coming up, and it's on my website. So everything's on my website, so you can just go there. But I do have a free webinar coming up, Break Free from Addiction and Trauma, and Thrive. So it's a free webinar that I'm going to be doing some really powerful stuff and then I'm going to be rolling out a monthly membership called the Sovereign Woman. So breaking free from addiction and trauma. So I'm really excited. And this is my first time announcing it right here.
Sweet. Awesome. Cool? That is very cool.
You're amazing. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And whoever is watching, again, questions, type in the comments. If you're watching the replay, let us know. Share this video with friends. If anyone that you think,
yes, please,
need to hear this, if they're struggling with addiction. Yeah, definitely.
Or habits. And again, I want people to know that it doesn't have to be, it's just
strong as labeled. Yeah. Habits that
a lot of times people are like, it's not an addiction. It's not, I don't have an addiction.
Some little habits, like, whatever it could be. We all have them. We all have them in different various levels and degrees. So, absolutely. So thank you so much, Victoria, for being here. It's such an honor. And yes, we'll have to definitely schedule
so
another
joy. I love it.
Yeah.
I adore you, Tanya. You're amazing. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now. Till next time.